We are making Silky Chocolate Ganache today. So this ganache is a little bit different from the usual ratio that we use for chocolate ganache. Typically we just use a 1-to-1 ratio of dark chocolate and heavy cream. This one is a little bit different though. We're also adding in sugar, glucose or corn syrup, and butter. So the sugar and the glucose are going to help give extensibility to the ganache, which means that we can stir it and manipulate it and it won't get overly dry and set really hard. So the sugars are going to help with that. And then the butter is going to give us a really beautiful sheen so that when we use this ganache to glaze our cake, we'll have a gorgeous shine instead of that kind of flat finish that you can end up getting. So in my pot down here, you guys can see my super old stove. In my pot I have heavy cream, so I have this over pretty high heat to bring this up. I'm going to go ahead and add in my granulated sugar. That will go in. And my glucose. In my separate bowl, I have my dark chocolate and my butter. It's important that the butter is room temperature. If it's too cold, the heat from the cream is not going to be able to actually melt the butter. So we do need to give that a head start and have that butter already room temperature. So you guys can see I have that right there, if you can see that. Butter and my chocolate. So it is important to note that when we are talking about dark chocolate, we're talking about chocolate that has a cocoa content of at least 53%. 64 is even better. The percent, when I'm talking about that, if you've taken chocolates or you remember what those percentages mean, is the amount of cocoa mass that is in the chocolate. So this directly translates to how firm of a set we're going to have on our ganache. So our classic ratio of 1 part dark chocolate to 1 part heavy cream really is only valid for using a dark chocolate that's at least 53%. Excuse something is burning on my stove. When we use chocolate that has a cocoa mass that is less than that, we don't have enough setting quality, so you have to start increasing the amount of chocolate that you are using in relation to the cream. So we use more chocolate than cream so that we still end up getting the set that we like. So this definitely comes into play for trying to make a milk chocolate ganache or a white chocolate ganache. When we get into white chocolate, we're almost using double or more the amount of white chocolate in relation to the cream so that we actually get something that is a set that is able to be used as a frosting. It's pipeable, that we could pipe truffles out of it. When it's less than that, it kind of ends up being more of a translucent glaze or even a sauce that's not applicable for using it as truffle centers or frostings. So now I can see from the color in here that my sugar and my glucose are dissolved. I have sort of this yellowish color happening in my pot. I know the light is terrible, sorry about that. Yay for fluorescent lighting and cooking in my really small kitchen. So once this comes to a boil, I'm going to be pouring it over my bowl of chocolate. One thing to note, so it is hard to find chocolate that is the appropriate percentage at the grocery store. So I think the chocolate that I ended up finding today at Kroger was only 43%. So there's a little bit of math that you can do to figure out how much more chocolate you would need to add. And I'll do a whiteboard or something that I'll post as well with the recipes for this week, so you guys can see how that worked out. Especially if, you know, coverture chocolate is not available to you. Sometimes chocolate chips are the only option you have. So you have to make those necessary adjustments. The good thing is that as people are becoming more familiar with quality chocolate, they are recognizing what those percentages are meaning. So more companies, even the lower end companies that are just making chips, are starting to label that way. So it's much easier on the professional side to be able to use some of those grocery store products when you're in a pinch like we are right now, and don't have access to coverture chocolate. So you don't have to stir this the whole time. One thing that you do want to keep an eye on whenever cream or milk, pretty much any dairy, comes to a boil, it will increase in volume very, very rapidly, and it can boil over really quickly. So it's not something that you want to walk away from. The worst thing is you hear the sizzle as the cream is boiling over, and then you don't know how much you've lost to be able to know if your ganache will actually turn out correctly. We could flavor this ganache many different ways. We can infuse our ganache by steeping herbs or spices in our cream. So that could be vanilla beans, cinnamon sticks. I could use dried lavender if you wanted to get some sort of herb in here. If you wanted to make rosemary ganache, you could steep that in here as well. So what we would do for that, so that we give time for the flavor to be extracted out, we would bring our cream to a boil. You add in whatever it is you want to steep, take it off the heat, let that sit for anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes, depending on how hard the substance is. So cinnamon sticks, if you think about those, they're very hard. So we would need to go towards the 30-minute steeping time. Something like vanilla beans that are very soft, or lavender, which can be extremely strong, those we can go towards the 10-minute time. Teas are great to use as well. So if you wanted to make an Earl Grey ganache, you could use tea bags in here. The thing to be careful with about the tea is that you do want to pay attention to the steeping time instructions that are for that particular tea. If you steep longer, it can turn very bitter. So if you need to punch up the flavor, you want to add more tea bags, not steep longer. So just something to keep in mind as you're looking to add flavors. Zests are great too. Orange zest is delicious, and orange is a delicious complement to chocolate. So yeah, lots of different options that you can use. So this is starting to steam. So I know that I'm going to be getting pretty close here to having a boil. So hopefully not too much longer. When I am done making this ganache, so I'm going to let this sit overnight, just at room temperature. That will give it enough time to set to a frosting consistency, which is what I need to be able to start with to decorate my cake. If I was in a hurry and I needed to make this ganache and use it in maybe an hour or so, you can rush it, but it's something that you have to be taking an active role in and really keeping an eye on. You can use an ice bath to, after you finish your ganache, you can put your ganache in an ice bath, but you have to be stirring very regularly and very often. Otherwise, the ganache can set really firmly on the outside of the bowl, and then you can have trouble getting everything to incorporate back together. Also, what can very easily happen, because we actually get carryover cooling because a metal bowl is absorbing the cold from the ice, and you may have the perfect consistency for your ganache. You take it off the ice and then you set it aside for a few minutes while you prepare other ingredients, but it has continued to chill from the coldness of the bowl, and it can set rock hard in that bowl. And then it becomes a very just back and forth process of trying to gently heat it over a double boiler or a microwave, and it's a lot of back and forth. So it's much easier to, if you are using the ice bath method, to just keep a very close eye on it, or if you have the time to go ahead and really just give it that space to set naturally at room temperature. Ganache will last well in the refrigerator. If you have more than you need, it'll keep for a couple weeks in the refrigerator. Okay, I think I'm almost there. The induction stoves are so much faster than an old electric stove. How are we doing? Okay, I'm starting to see just the movement of bubbles, so I'm going to go ahead and take that off. And then, just so you guys can see, I'm going to bring this in over here. And I'm going to pour this in about 5 to 6 increments. So what I'm trying to do is gradually melt this chocolate. You can use an immersion blender for this instead, but a spatula works just as well. What you want to try and avoid is actually using a whisk, because a whisk is going to incorporate air, and that can end up giving you a very dry ganache that is not as pleasant to eat and is also a lot trickier to work with. So once I see that I'm not getting any more melting of the chocolate, that's when I'll go ahead and pour my next increment in. So I'm pretty much just folding and pressing that in. So I'm not trying to incorporate any air. I'm not stirring wildly, just keeping this as dense as possible, so I get a really rich, luxurious finished product. So my last inclusion of cream is in, and I'm just giving this a last stir to make sure it's fully incorporated. There's a really beautiful sheen on this now, nice and shiny. I don't have any separation of cream or butter. So it's just nice and beautiful and smooth. So this I'm going to set aside now until tomorrow, and then I'll be ready to frost my cake with it. I do like to keep a little eye on this just to make sure it's setting nicely. So maybe about once every hour, I'll just for 2 or 3 times, I'll come back and just give it a stir to help it make sure that it's cooling evenly.
That's it.